All right. What did you guys learn from Ryan last week? How are you feeling about authentication with Clerk? We think we understand it. We think we see why the capstone is, how we can integrate it into our capstone. Have you guys tried integrating it into your capstone? Have you thought, screw off, I'm not going to put it in my capstone. It's not a requirement. Cool. So here's what we're going to do for tonight. Tonight is all about capstone questions. So if you have questions, if you would like to implement something in your capstone, we can do that. If there is something that you would like to see how I would do it in a project that is full stack, but don't necessarily want it done in your code directly, we can use the blog project or any of the other full stack projects to go through, do like a tiny little demo of, hey, how would I get information in my database to show up in a table? Or, hey, how would I make it so if someone was signed in, I could store their user information? Or, hey, I never really understood state and React. Can we do a state example? Or anything along those lines. It can be based in your capstone, or we can do it in kind of a separate project. We don't have to do it in your code. That's up to you. We're going to leave the floor open for a couple minutes on that. And if none of you are volunteering any suggestions or any ideas, what we're going to do is use Ryan's code. And I'm going to kind of show you the perspective of a senior developer looking at another senior developer's code to figure out how that code is working. And the reason why I saved that is because I think it's really valuable to go through someone else's code for the first time and kind of see how it's working, kind of talk your way through that. So I'm going to reserve that in my back pocket. In case none of you guys have questions, I'm going to go through Ryan's code. We're going to kind of talk our way through it, and then we're going to see how we would implement that into the blog project to get a little bit more practice of how do we make a users table work, how do we use Clerk as a third-party library, all of that kind of stuff. So that is what we will get into second half of class, depending on how many questions you guys have in the first half. Danny said how to add images from the database or add images to an already started database. The best place for that is going to be our blog code. So let me pull that up because I think let me see, how much of the images did we do on that? Post ID, include the comments. We never did. We never got images working in the blog. That's where we will start tonight. Okay. Let me share my screen. I'm going to recommend that you guys don't code along with me tonight. I'm going to recommend that you kind of just go with the flow, ask questions as they pop up. However, if you are someone who like absolutely will not get it unless you're coding along, I will not stop you. I will do a live share, but I am going to recommend that you kind of at this point just kind of go with the flow and ask questions as they come up. So I am going to go to my week 19, my day 2. I'm going to delete my node modules in both the front end and in the back end. I'm going to copy my whole day 2 folder. I'm going to make a new folder called week 20. I'm going to paste in my day 1 and rename it as my day 2. And then I'm going to open up both folders in separate windows. So I'm going to do my blog front end first, my blog back end second. No, try that again. I am going to right click on my server.js and npm install. I'm going to rinse and repeat that on my front end, open an integrated terminal, npm install. I'm going to get you 2 live share links. Front end. And back end. And now that I've got those started, I am going to npm start to get my front end open, and then npm start on my back end to get my back end up and running. Okay, so where did we leave this project off? We made it so that when we hit the new post button, there's a title, a content, and a tagline. And we were forward thinking enough in our database model to include this image and image type. But you notice we don't have anything going on in our new post form in order to get that image up and running. So what we can do, give me 1 second. Believe I have reference code for this. So what we can do is when we make a new post, we go to our source, to our new post.js. And down here, we've got all of our form fields, right? Our title, our content, our author, the tagline, that kind of stuff. Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add in 1 new section. And the label is going to say image. And we can say that is HTML for the image. And the class name is going to be a form label. And then we are also going to put in here an input type, and this is a new one. I don't think we've used this before. Input type file. If I go look at my front end, you can see we've got an image and it says no file chosen. Okay, we're on the right track. However, we've got to change it up a little bit. We can't use the JSON.stringify. JSON, just think about JSON. What data types are in JSON? Well, it can do a text, it can do input, it can do numbers, it can do booleans, true and false. But if we think about an image is just a giant block of text, right? We actually have that set up in the database correctly as the blob. But the blob can't be sent in JSON. So we've got to change how we send our data through the form in order to make it to the backend. So here's what we do. We end up coming up to our post request where we make this form. And instead of making the post an object, we're actually going to get rid of all of this. And we're also going to get rid of our headers content type and our body. And instead, what we're going to do is we are going to still send to the new post, but this time we are going to get our body from the form data. Well, where does the form data come from? We actually have to make that. We say const form data is a new form data. Form data is a function that is built into the browser. And we say event.target from that. Different way of sending that information into the backend. Well, we've got our form data going on here, but now we've got to give our backend a heads up. Hey, you're going to get a different data type coming into the server. So what we do is we need a new package called multer, M-U-L-T-E-R. What does multer do? Well, it turns out that the internet, not really good at sending large files. So what the front end does is it sends the data in something called a multi-part stream. In other words, it breaks that file up into multiple smaller API calls. The problem is that's really hard to deal with on the back end. The back end is getting this in all these little chunks, and it's like, no, I just tell me when you're done. Tell me when you've sent all of the chunks in. So just like we use this express.json here, we have to tell our backend, hey, heads up, you're going to get these in tiny little parts. You want to pull them all together. So here's how we do that. We npm install this package called multer, multer. Then, while that's installing, we're going to import the multer from the multer package. Then we are going to come down and say, hey, let's make up this new thing called storage. That's where we're going to save the files as the little tiny parts of it are coming in. So we say multer.memory storage. Then we say, hey, the upload is going to use the multer's storage that we just created right here. And finally, we need to tell the API server to use the upload, and we got to tell it what we're uploading. We're uploading a single photo. Because of that, it now knows where to look to get that that photo data. Now, we also need to, on the front end, say, hey, the name of this input file that we're uploading is going to be our photo that we're uploading. So I save that. I come over here, and now we need to change how we're making our new post. So what we do is we panic because I can't find. There we go. So we go to the new post, and instead of just throwing in the entire rec.body, I'm going to throw in kind of a breakdown of what's in the body. So the title is going to come from the rec.body.title. I'm going to make sure that I've got either a name or an ID on these. So here I've got my ID of title, so that should be fine. I've got my ID of content, and I've got my ID of tagline. So we're all set there. And say content is coming from the rec.body.content. The tagline is coming from the rec.body.tagline. But here's where it gets interesting. To get the image out of what's getting uploaded to the server, we say the image is coming from the rec.file. That's a new one. And we are going to get out the buffer of that file. Think about a buffer as when you're streaming, right? When you're streaming a video, what is buffering? Well, buffering means that you caught up to everything that you had loaded, and you have to wait for another 10 seconds or 20 seconds of that video to load before you can keep watching it. That buffer is exactly the same thing here. We are uploading little tiny snippets of the file. And once all of the snippets of the file get uploaded, they're stored in this buffer, in this temporary area. And we've got to tell it, take all of that temporary data and dump it into the database, into our image. So the buffer is kind of our temporary memory place before we insert it into the database. We also need to insert the image type. So to do that, we are going to get our rec.file.mime type. And to give you a breakdown of everything that we're seeing here, if I console.log my rec.file, we can see some of the details in there. Okay, let's play around with that a little bit. I'm going to say my first image post. I'm going to go to Unsplash and use some random image. I don't know, this one looks good. I'm going to say image post content. Yay, images. And I'm going to choose that file and hit create post. And we get a failed to fetch because I forgot to start my backend. I npm installed something, but I didn't npm start it. So I npm start, close out of the warning. I'm making sure I'm back online, and I hit create post. Okay, now we got errors, but let's dig into this a little bit. What happened on my backend? I added in this console.log rec.file. Again, how does it know where this file is? Because we told it to look in the photo field. How does it know what the photo field is? Because in the front end, we added in our name of photo. So it knows where to look. So it uploaded it and it said field name is photo. Great, we knew that. It gave me this JPEG. Okay, that's great. Now we know the file name. It told me the MIME type. The MIME type you can think about as kind of the file extension. It's the type of the file that got uploaded. That is an agreed upon standard. I forget what MIME stands for, but it's basically a standard that the entire internet agrees on of, hey, if you're uploading a file, here are going to be the different file types. And finally, we see this buffer. Now, this buffer doesn't mean anything to us, but to the computer, that's where all of the data of the image is residing. And then we get the size, which I'm guessing is in kilobytes or in something like that. So let's see what that looks like in our Beekeeper. I'm going to go to Beekeeper. I'm going to go to my local DB. I'm going to change my database to blog. I'm going to look at my posts, and we've got some problems. First of all, my image type got loaded in. That's cool. My image got loaded in, and it's this weird string going on here. It's huge, but it's this weird string. I'm like, okay, whatever. As long as some image is in there, there's got to be some way of getting that image back out. The bigger problem, though, is that my title, tagline, and content are all null. So I got to fix that. I don't really know how to do that. Let's see. Still using my JSON. I've got all of that set up right. You look at my post editor again, form data. Add in the body. And it's got all the form data in it. I wonder if I need to use names instead of IDs. Let's give that a try. So I'm going to go to new post. I'm going to go to Beekeeper and delete this one out because this one's missing a bunch of the data. Then I'm going to say image post. I'm going to hit choose file. I'm going to grab my image and upload it. I'm going to hit create post. Everything appears to work now. So I come over here, I refresh. And now I've got my image post, all of my data, and the image itself. Okay, so a little different, right? We're not using JSON anymore. We're using this thing called form data. And you can see my image post has shown up here. Like, okay, that's cool. I hit read more, and here it is, but where's my image? Well, if I go to my read page, and I'm already console logging the data.post, so I want to see what's in there. So I come over here, I inspect, I go to my console, and I have this object. And I'm like, that's cool, my image post is here, and my image is here as a type buffer in all of this data. But now I want that data to show up. How do I actually get that image to show? Well, what I can do, I can find where I did it. Is I can add in to my code. Let's say I want it to show up underneath this header row. So I can make an image tag, and we've seen image tags before, and we're going to say src equals, and then we got to give it this very special format to know how do I pull that image in, because normally your src is going to be a link. In this case, we're not linking it to anything. We're saying, look, we already have the data. It's already sitting in our state. I want to use that data from the state. So here's what I do. I say data, and then I've got to tell it what kind of data is it. So I say it is a post.image type. Where is that image type coming from? It's coming from the image type right here. Where did we see that image type? That image type we stored right here when the file got uploaded. So just storing the data of the image alone is not enough. We also need to store the type of the data because the database only knows the data itself. It doesn't know the type of the data unless we save that in as a separate file type. So we add in our file type there, and we go back to our front end, and we say, okay, now that you know what the image type is, we are also going to tell you, hey, it is encoded in the database as base 64. And the way that you can make that data show up is make a buffer from the post.image data. And finally, we want to take all of that information and we want to convert it to a string that is base 64 encoded. So I save, I come over here, I refresh, I get a buffer is not defined. I need to import my buffer from the buffer package. And we get all kinds of errors. Because we need to npm install our buffer. We restart. We refresh. And everything breaks. Import. Oh, I need these in curly braces. And just like that, we get an image. It is huge. So we need to come back down to our image and say, hey, the style on that is going to be a max width of 100%. And we get our image showing up that we uploaded. Okay, Danny, were you prepared for that to be such a complicated answer? Was anyone prepared for that to be such a complicated answer? This is a question that Shannon actually asked 2 weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago. And I said, oh, buddy, hold on to your horses because that is a very complicated answer. So I'm going to show you a simpler way of doing this as well. But a couple things that I want to call out here. Normally, just like the internet isn't good at sending large chunks of information, it turns out the database isn't good about saving large chunks of images. So in a production application, and an application that's ready to be scaled up to like thousands and thousands of users, we actually wouldn't take this approach. Instead, believe it or not, we would do something even more complicated than this solution. Instead, what we would do is use a product like Amazon AWS S3, which stands for Simple Storage Solution, SSS, S3, or we would use Google Cloud, cloud storage, or something like that. And the reason we want to do that is because we want to kind of think about our application in four different places. We've got our front end, and our front end showing our React code, and that's fine. We've got our API, and our API is connecting into the database. We've got the database itself, which is just responsible for saving the information, but isn't really good about permissions and who can access what, who's allowed to update, whatever. And then finally, if we are storing files, we run into this problem. we have a couple different options. We could store it in the database, and databases have gotten better at storing files, but it's not always the best place to store them. We could store them on our API server, and 5 years ago, that was considered completely normal, right? Our API server has files, it's got the JavaScript, we have a file system in it, we can read and write to it, and everything's fine. The problem is these pesky DevOps engineers determined that they were going to have a better way of deploying everything. And every time they deployed, it would wipe the file system clean and only use the new code that we uploaded. Well, that's fine for our database information because our database is separate. It's not getting wiped every time we deploy. But what is getting wiped are all of the files that we have uploaded if we store that image in the file system instead of storing it in the database. Or storing it in a separate product like a cloud storage, right? So you can think about cloud storage S3 as kind of like Dropbox or iCloud Drive, right? It is specifically designed to store files that got uploaded and nothing else. Doesn't run your API, doesn't have database information. All it does is store files. So I ran into this really tough situation because it's a very common request to say, hey, I want someone when they post a new thing to my website to be able to upload a picture of it. Whether that's a tarot card, whether that's a new puppy that's getting posted, whether that's a counselor's profile picture, whether that's, sorry, that's all I got off the top of my head. But you guys get the idea, right? Of I'm uploading something new. I want to include an image of that. Well, I didn't really want to go the S3 route because that's even more complicated than storing it in the database. I could have just written those files to our backend, right? I could have made a new folder here that instead of just DB, it would say something like images, and we could have the images come out of there. The problem is that when we deploy, when Nathan comes in a little over a week from today, all of those images are going to be sitting on your local computer, and they're not going to really sync well up to your production. And every time you deploy something new to production, when you fix a bug or add a new feature, we run into problems of what happens to those images. Those images might get wiped. So I went for the solution of let's store it in the database because the database is going to save all of that, no matter how many times you deploy. So I caution you here for your capstones, totally fine to use this. If you were showing this code off to someone else, you could mention, hey, right now I'm storing images in the database because I only have a couple of users, but eventually I would like to set it up to be a more robust solution. So before we move on to the slightly easier approach of storing the file path in the database instead of storing the entire image, I'm going to do a quick review on this. Before I do, does anyone have questions? If your brain is sizzled, don't worry, I'm going to try and get you back after this. Okay, let's do a quick review of everything that I covered here. Anyone glad that I told you not to try and follow along with me? Okay, so we made a couple changes. In our form, we changed all of our names of the inputs. Nope. In our new post form, we change all of our IDs to names. That's because form data runs better off names compared to our event target form elements, which runs better off IDs. So because we are using form data instead of JSON to send the information, we change all of our IDs to names. We also add in this input and we put a name on it of photo. Then we go up to our API call, we take out the JSON, and we use this form data thing instead. that form data thing gets sent in as our body. Well, the problem is we have to tell our server, hey, you might be getting JSON, that's fine, but you also might be getting a file upload. And Node and Express don't do file uploads well because the browser sends it in a bunch of little different pieces. So to get around that, we install this new package called Multer. We then come in and add in our Multer setup to basically say, hey, as those files are coming in, just store them in memory until you get all of them. And also, hey, by the way, the upload is going to upload a single photo. This photo here lines up with the name of the file input right here. Now that we gave it a heads up of, hey, server, you're going to use this upload thing, which is coming from Multer, which is going to store everything in memory, and where you want to look is the photo, we can now change up our post a little bit. So we go down to this post.create, and instead
Sorry,
of taking...
can I ask a question real quick?
Yes.
We specified single up there, but if we hadn't a specified single, would we need to say multiple if they wanted to add more than one image at a time? Or
Yeah, I don't know that off the top of my head. I believe what you could do is something like add in like photo 2, and that way it's looking for a single file in photo, and then it's looking for another single file in photo 2, because hypothetically in your create post, when you choose the files, you could pick like multiple okay, bad example. You can set it up in the browser to support multiple files in one single file upload. I wouldn't recommend doing that. I would recommend setting it up to say, hey, if you want to upload 3 different photos, call it photo 1, photo 2, photo 3, and then in the upload here, make it photo 1, photo 2, photo 3. It is possible to make one file upload multiple files, but that gets a little hairy and complicated to implement. So I would just recommend splitting it out. Okay. Other questions? That was a really good question.
Max?
Yes.
Okay. For the image type, where you specify that the image type would be what the MIME type was, where did you specify what type of image the MIME type would be? I was a little...
Yeah, great question.
Wait.
So our rec.file here is
Yeah.
what Multer is loading up right here, right? Now, Multer is getting all of the data of not just the image, but this entire object right here. This is what the browser provides to us in the form data. So the browser is actually smart enough to say, hey, when you upload the file, here's the name of the file. Here is the field name that it was in. But not only am I giving you all of the data in this temporary buffer of where I loaded it into, I'm also telling you the MIME type of it is image.jpg. And if we actually upload a PNG, the browser would change that MIME type for us and give us image/PNG.
Very good. Thank you for the explanation.
Yes, very good question. It is storing it in like local memory in RAM plush, RAM that the Node server is using. So it's not, there are other places we can actually say, hey, store it in file storage, actually upload the image to an images folder. We could actually wire it up to Multer, supports a lot of different types, but memory storage is probably one of the easiest to say, hey, while those parts of the file are coming in, just store it in memory, keep it in a temporary buffer, and then once you get all of them in, go down and actually create it in the database and use that buffer data to load it into the image blob in the database.
Gotcha. Did we also make a change since we switched between ID and names? Did we also make a change in the backend to our code?
No, because we didn't specify when we use form data here, the headers of this request get set to form data instead of application JSON. Because of that, and because the molter up here knows that if we're uploading form data to use the form data instead of the JSON parser, molter is actually loading up our rec.body, just like express.json would if the content type was JSON in the headers.
So what is form data? Is it a package that we imported, or?
It is built into the browser. It's kind of like saying JSON.parse. How does it know what JSON is? JSON's just built into the browser. Form data is just like that. We don't have to import it. Form data just knows, the browser knows how to make that work. And surprisingly, Express does not. And so that's why we need molter to say, hey, when you detect the form data, this is how you're going to deal with it before you give me access to it down here.
Got it. Thank you.
So this is considered a middleware. Anyone remember where else we've seen a middleware? Hint, I didn't teach it. Ryan last week, I believe, touched on middlewares, right? Hey, the request comes in, but before you run your endpoint, what do you want to happen in the middle of it? Well, the JWT token is going to come in, the user authentication data is going to come in with Clerk. I'm going to use Clerk. I'm going to figure out what that authentication information is. And that way, when I get to actually running your endpoint, I'm going to know what user you actually are. The same goes here. This molter in the upload of the single photo is going to run before my async rec res runs. Because of that, I'm going to be able to get access to things like the file that got uploaded. Okay, so we pull the memory, the photo out of memory that's sitting in this buffer. We store it in this thing called image, and we know that the database knows that a big old blob of something from memory is coming because we set it to blob. We also store the MIME type. And this is important because a user could upload a JPEG, they could upload a PNG, they could upload even a PDF, right? And the browser doesn't know what kind of data, how it's encoded, how it's formatted, unless we store that along with all of the data that is in the file. So that draws a line. And it's important for you to draw a line in your head too and go, that's how we create a new post. So stop there, look at this, look at our request here. Do we have any questions about getting the photo into the database? We haven't gotten the photo out of the database, but we put it in. Does anyone have any questions so far?
So just to recap, anything that's coming from an outside source will have to buffer, and it will need a molter in order to convert it, so to
Yes.
speak. Okay.
Anything big, right? We don't need
large.
molter for JSON, but anything that we're uploading that's a file or anything large, yes, that's when you need molter.
Okay. When you had fixed the style on that picture because it was very large and you was explaining like the cloud and stuff like that, is there any way that you can put like some type of coding in there to give like a constraint to all post uploads to give a certain size so that it can be converted onto the page and the user doesn't get like an error message, like file too big? Or
Yes, there is. It's kind of involved to build that. But basically what you would do is in this server.post, you would be able to say something like, you see how we have this rec.size down here?
yeah.
What we could do is, and this is just pseudocode, this isn't actually implemented, but we could say if the rec.file.size is bigger than, I don't know, 500,000, which I'm sure there's a way to convert that to megabytes or set the size. You could say like res.send back an error that says file too big.
Or like 1024 megabytes, something like that. Yeah.
And then else, I actually want you to create the post and send it into the database. Now you would have to handle this on the front end, right? you would have to say something like fetch, then say if the response had a error that equals file too big, or if it had an error alert the response.error.
If you're using an like an outside like API, right?
Mhm.
So to speak, would that handle that for you, or I still would need to do that on the front end? So when it fetches, it converts it correctly. It usually will handle it for you.
It depends on, most APIs do not support you uploading a file because file storage, as we've all seen, is complicated. And it's expensive to be able to save big files like that. So it's pretty rare for a API to support photo uploads. If they did, it would be on the API side to handle limiting file size uploads. It would be on you to be able to take that error message and display it to the end user.
Okay, well, this was a great example. Thank you.
Now, what isn't rare, and what Danny's half a class question long answer is going to be, is what if the API is sending us an image to display? That is a little different and a little easier. So rare for us to send an image to an API other than our own, not rare for our API to give us an image URL that we then need to display. And we're gonna get into that example in 1 second.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? This was a really good question, Rain, on limiting the file size. And this is very common to do. You get into little intricacies of storing things, and but that's a very common thing.
Ask a follow-up on that question.
Mhm.
How complicated would it be? And also, where would you handle it if you wanted to resample? Like if it's too big, resample the image so it's only certain pixels by pixels or maximum width or height or something.
Thank you,
If-
Doug.
If you thought that this was complicated, you should see what it takes for an image library to work. There is a very popular one called Image Magic. It is, I believe it's magic with a K at the end of it. It turns out that 30 years ago, a JPEG was like a revolutionary new thing because images were so big that when they were sending them over the internet, they would actually send a black and white version of it first, just so you could see it. And then they would go get the color version and it would load on top of the black and white version. Yes, I'm dating myself a little bit, but what ended up happening was there were all of these standards that came out. And what is a JPEG? What's a PNG? What's all of that? It's actually a compression algorithm. So if you want to go back to like Silicon Valley on HBO, and they've got this magical compression algorithm, right? That is exactly what a JPEG is. That's exactly what a PNG is. It's a way to take this huge amount of data and tell the computer, hey, run this algorithm against this data. And based off of that data that's much smaller than the original, we can actually get the full image out of it. Maybe we lose a little bit of quality, but we can do that. So there is a very popular open source library called Image Magic. If you go to NPM and look at Image Magic, this is not the right one. Actually, I'm surprised. Let me do this. Download stats. Yeah, so this is Image Magic on Brew. Image Magic takes a little bit more than just JavaScript to work. And the reason why this is complicated is because even to this day, licensing of different image file formats is a really big deal. And so because of that, and the world's getting better, fortunately on video like it has on images, the licensing has gotten easier for you to be able to do this. But ImageMagick is a package that allows you to be able to put in those parameters and say, hey, instead of a 50 meg JPEG, compress it down to 50% quality, resize it to these dimensions, and then save that file instead. It is often incorporated in your cloud storage flow, right? That more complicated flow using S3 or using Google Cloud Storage or anything like that. Oftentimes, those libraries will let you compress the image before you save it into that cloud storage location. So ImageMagick is what you would use. However, that flow goes way over what we can cover in one class. But ImageMagick is a very popular flow to be able to compress down the image if whatever comes in is too large. Other questions?
When you're converting a file into like a different file type, let's say I used to have an issue like with SVG file types all the time.
Yep.
What program do you tend to use to convert your images? I mean, you probably just use Adobe or something. I don't know, but what do you use?
Good question. I hate Adobe. I think Adobe is a complete ripoff. I think it's something like $50 or $60 a month. And the problem that I have with Adobe is that whenever I need to use Adobe, I need it one time for about 2 minutes every 2 months. And it kills me to pay $50 for that. So what I use is Affinity. It is Affinity Photo, Affinity Designer, and Affinity Publisher. They are, I think they're $50 each, but it's a one-time fee. So once you pay for it, that's it. And if you are, so you want to separate it out and be careful. There are 2 types of images. There are what we call rasterized images, which are basically just pixelated images, right? Hey, this pixel should be this color, and JPEG's going to run the algorithm to tell the computer that. That's fine. Raster images, though, are a certain size. So if you blow them up beyond their intended resolution, they start to get blurry, right? We've all worked with low resolution images before. An SVG stands for a scalable vector graphic. Vector is the other image type. So we've got rasterized or pixelated images, and then we've got vector images. Vector images are what you want to work with for something like a logo, right? If I want to go out and get the Apple logo, instead of showing it as a bunch of different little pixels, what a vector graphic does is it stores the paths and the colors and the fills of that logo. So instead of storing, hey, this pixel, this color is gray, instead what it's doing is storing all of the lines that it takes to make the Apple logo look like an Apple logo. Those images the file sizes in a vector graphic tend to be a lot smaller, as long as what you're storing is actually meant to be a vector image. So if you try to store a photo that you took outside and try and store it as a vector file, it's going to be like gigabytes big, because it's like, I don't know how to store all these different lines and everything that's going on. But if you're storing a logo or anything that's kind of like a clip art kind of drawing, that's when you want to use an SVG. And when those file sizes are much smaller, the benefit of a vector is that you could literally take that SVG and put it up on a billboard, and that billboard would look the same resolution as if you were looking at it on your phone.
Instead of being blurry. Yeah. I noticed that SVG is usually like when I purchase a logo, it's like they give me like the original like cookie cutter print of it. That's what I think about. You know, yeah.
And so you use Affinity Designer for any kind of vector file, and then you use Affinity Photo for any kind of rasterized or pixelized file, JPEG, PNG, that kind of stuff. And then Affinity Publisher is more for like if I'm actually printing something out and like making a magazine or something like that. That's what Affinity Publisher is for. I probably know about 4% of Photoshop. I think most people know about 1% of Photoshop. I do know people who know 90% of Photoshop. Because I know so little of Photoshop, all of the features that I'm looking for in Photoshop are also in Affinity Photo. And then the same goes for Adobe Illustrator. I know even less of Adobe Illustrator, but the features that I do know how to use, they are also in Affinity Designer. So those are the two programs that I use. There are definitely free conversion programs out there. The only thing that you want to be careful is when you're converting an SVG, you want to make sure that you're converting it at a high enough resolution, because it's very easy to convert an SVG to a PNG. It is very, very hard to convert a PNG back to an SVG. Hopefully that answers your question.
Great knowledge. Thank you.
Yep. And as a developer, you don't really need an Affinity Photo or Affinity Designer, but every now and then you'll have a client who like sends you a logo and it's got a white background in it, and you're like, I just want to get rid of the white background. And you ask the client, and the client's like, I don't know, man, that's the only JPEG I have. What do you want from me? And so having those photos or those programs can be helpful, but there are a lot of different options out there. So take my recommendation with a grain of salt.
But that's great if you want to pursue like UI or UX or, you know.
Yeah, and fortunately that field has developed. So there are now programs like Sketch and Adobe XD, and Figma is probably the biggest one or the newest one. Those programs were born out of UI designers being frustrated in Illustrator or Photoshop, right? Because Photoshop, great for retouching photos, not the best for making a UI. Affinity Designer, great for vector graphics, not necessarily the best for making a user interface. And so there was a new generation of tools specifically for UI designers. Sketch, Figma, and Adobe XD are the three biggest. And those are what I would use if you were getting into UI design. But you definitely can use Photoshop. You definitely can use Illustrator. Or Affinity's versions of that. Just depends what tools you know.
Very good. Thank you.
Yep. Okay. Let's do a quick review of what happens when we get this into our database. Our database is storing the huge blob of information, and it's storing the image type as the JPEG. We don't have to modify anything in our get post, because our post model already knows it's sending back a blob of information. The problem is when we get that blob in the browser and we look at it in our console, we can see that it says image data, and it's this weird number. And notice this number here lines up with the same number we got when we uploaded that file, which is kind of cool. And then we got this thing that says type buffer. But this right now is in JSON. We know it's in JSON because it's got key value pairs. The image is here. We need to basically convert that. And it also has this image type JPEG. So we modify an IMG tag on our page very carefully. And we say, hey, I'm going to send you some raw data, but you need to know what kind of data I'm sending you. I'm sending you the image type that was stored in the database. What is our image type? It is our image/JPEG. So our image tag's like, all right, great. I know that you're going to send me a JPEG. What format are you sending it to me in? And I'm saying, hey, I'm going to send it to you in base 64. That's basically how it can convert the letters and numbers into the actual data that's used to display that image. Then I'm going to make a buffer from the post image data, because this is just an array according to JSON. We need to convert that into a buffer so that the front end knows how to build out that image. And then finally, we tell it, hey, I told you I was sending you base 64. So we're going to take that buffer and convert it into base 64 from there. Now that we've got the base 64 in there, we send that all into the source of the data, and that makes our image show up. And then finally, we throw on a max width of 100%. And that means if we upload any other posts, they will all have a max width of 100%. And of course, you could set that by height or pixels or anything like that and go from there. Okay. Believe it or not, I spent 3 hours on getting this code to work. This is the simplest way I could get a form file user submission to work for you guys. So if you need to show a file that the user has uploaded, this is going to be the best example code for you. We are going to show a simpler way of what if the user isn't the one uploading the file? What if I know what the files are? I want to put them somewhere, have, excuse me, have that data. Oh, excuse me. Oh, what came over me there? I want to save the information in my database, but I don't necessarily need to store all the data of the image. I just need to store the name of the file. That's what we're going to touch on now. So what I'm going to do, first of all, any questions on the file upload itself and how we get the image to finally show up to the end user? Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my comments, and I'm going to add in a new column to my comments called comment picture path. And I'm going to make that a varchar 255. Be careful on this. If you've got a very long file name, it will go over 255. I'm going to go ahead and hit apply on that. Then I'm going to go to my public folder. I'm going to create a new folder called images. And I'm going to throw a couple images in there. Name as ing1. We're going to go back to Unsplash. I'm going to grab this one and this one, and we're going to put them in our public folder. Notice I'm doing this on the front end, not on the back end. Okay, now that I've got them in my public folder, I am going to modify my beekeeper. I'm going to go to my comments table. I'm going to close out all of these. Open up my comments. And I've already got a couple comments in here, but now I've got my comment picture path in here. So what I'm going to say is, hey, the name of this one is going to be img1.jpg. This one is going to be img2.jpg, img1.jpg, img2.jpg. When you are modifying data in Beekeeper, if it is in yellow or red, it has not been applied yet. So make sure you hit the apply button. We'll turn green for a second and then show you it's saved in the database. Now, because I've created these files manually in the front end, I'm telling the back end, hey, you don't know about these files. I'm just telling you that whatever comment is created here, you should show img2.jpg. This is really good if you are manually loading in your database. Notice we didn't have to do anything with blobs. We didn't have to do anything fancy. We just added a new varchar. We call it comment picture path. We go to our backend and we say, hey, when you're getting the comment, there is something called comment picture path that is a data type of string. Then when we make our comments show up down here, what I would like you to do is between the author and the comment, show an IMG with an SRC that goes to the images folder and shows whatever the comment picture path is. And I would also style this, let's just say that has a height of 100 pixels and spell height right. Okay, what did we do there? We went to Beekeeper, we went to our structure, we added in comment picture path, we went to our model in our backend and told it, hey, you've got a new thing called comment picture path. We stored in just the name of the file in the database by manually editing Beekeeper right here, and we hit the apply button. Then in our front end, we added in where we want our image to show up. We put in this path that lines up with our public folder over here, and then we put in our comment picture path. And just like that, if we go back to our home and open up a post with comments on it, stand by. Now we can see the pictures associated with those comments showing up. Who here wish I only showed them that and not the entire way of storing it in the database? Can't use this method if the user is uploading the photos. However, if you are creating your own database with your own information in it, and you want to associate a file with that image or with that row in the database, you can go to Beekeeper, store in the name of the path, then update your model so that Sequelize knows about it, then use your IMG source, use that path information to drop in the SRC. Plash, you caught me. So before, I had an error message that said, cannot read properties of null reading data. And unfortunately, it didn't give me in this entire stack trace anything helpful for me to figure out where that's erroring out. So I'm thinking, all right, where did I use data? Well, I use data right here. But the problem is that when I loaded this particular post, I created this post before we had image support. So there's no post, there's no image associated with this post. So JavaScript's like, I'm not going to show you anything because I can't read the data of the image in the post when the image doesn't exist in this post. So basically what we do is we say, hey, check to see if there is a post image. If there is not a post image, this will be false. And whatever happens down after, whatever comes after this ampersand won't show up. But if there is a post.image, there will be data inside of it, so you can show this IMG. This is called a, Doug, help me out. Is this a short circuit? A JS short circuit?
I was going to say short circuit, but I don't know if that's accurate. That was the best I could come up with.
Well, we were on the same page. That's a win. Yeah, I'm pretty sure this is a short circuit. So in JavaScript, this is a little bit of a hack. If this syntax is confusing to you, the other way that you will commonly see it is saying, if there is a post.image, show this whole thing. Otherwise, don't show anything. That's a basic ternary operator and an inline if statement. We've seen that before. It accomplishes the exact same thing. However, the other syntax is a little bit of a shorthand to say if there isn't anything in this first thing, show false, don't show anything. But if there is something in it, then go show the second thing, which has all of the data inside of it. So this is a ternary operator. This is the common way of seeing it. The short circuit, the double ampersand, is just taking advantage of JavaScript syntax to type a couple less characters. I am going to push all of this code right now so that if you need the image upload to work from an end user, or you need to store image paths in your database, all of that information is now uploaded into GitHub in the week 20 day 1 folder that you can use as an example. Would anyone else like to ask a question that will take an hour and 20 minutes to answer? Danny, thank you for asking that, because I did all of the work to get the file upload working. And then on Tuesday, I was like, yeah, I'm off now. I don't need to show you any of that. So thank you for asking that, because that's a very common question. And you should feel honored. Every other cohort, I've told everyone, too complicated, don't try it on your own. And this cohort, I just bored all of you with a very in-depth answer of how to use Multer. But you can, if you are feeling adventurous and would like to get file uploads to work or to store paths in your database, that is a really good example of how to do both. Other questions? So Tara, think about reactions to the comments as another so there are two ways of thinking about this. One way is kind of Reddit style, where Reddit says you can reply to any reply and it will go as deep as you would like it to, right? And for that, we commonly use a concept called recursion. Recursion says when we basically need to loop over something, but we don't know how many times the loop needs to run, recursion is often the right answer for that. Recursion is really easy for the computer to understand, where it says, hey, I'm going to go call this function for the first time. And if this thing is true inside the function, I'm going to go call that very function again. I'm going to call the function inside the function, the same function. And I'm going to loop over that to basically say, no matter how many times that the user replies to a reply, I'm going to go keep on getting that data. I'm going to keep on showing that as one level deeper into the interface. Recursion is probably one of the hardest concepts to master as a developer, because while the computer has no problem looping that way, we don't really think in terms of inception. And that is exactly what recursion is. It is going one level deeper. It is calling the function in its own function. However, that is often the most efficient way to run over a loop when we don't know how many times the loop needs to run. I would not recommend that for your capstone. Being able to reply to a reply has a lot of user interface implications. And you will notice an application like Facebook will allow you to comment and will allow you to reply to a comment. But when you reply to a comment on a comment, it will just keep it 2 levels deep instead of going deeper and deeper. It just basically creates a thread underneath that one comment. So what you would want to do is create a new table, right? We've got our comments table. You would want to make a comments reply table or a comments thread table that would store, instead of the post ID that the comment was made on, instead it would store the comment ID that the threaded post was replying to. From there, you would make another API call, get that data, and show it in your interface.
And by 2 levels deep, you mean that it will allow you to reply and reply only to the author of the original comment.
Correct.
Okay.
And then if you hit reply to the comments comment, it would still post on the original comment that the second comment was.
You know how
And
it says like at like Max. Max is the main person. It will only at him, but not the additional commenters that you could be replying to. Is that what you mean?
No. So notifications are a whole other can of worms.
Okay.
What I'm saying is think about Reddit, right? Where there's comment A and then comment, and then if someone replies to comment A, it goes down a level deeper, right? And then as a user, you have the option of responding to comment A, which is going to keep it on comment B's level, or you can comment on comment B, which is going to take it in 3 levels deep and now show your response to the response. That system is very hard to develop. That system requires recursion, a different data structure in the database, a little bit harder to build out kind of the Reddit style application where you can reply multiple levels deep. Instead, what you could do is only go 2 levels deep, where the first level is the original comment, then any replies to that comment go a second level deep. But if you reply to the second level deep, it's going to keep everything on the second level. It's not going to go to a third level deep.
Understood.
Yes, relational data tables. So I'm going to cheat and say we're already using one. If that doesn't make sense to you there, though, I will gladly make a second one. And you know what? That's what, sorry, thinking on my feet, quite literally, because I'm standing. I'm going to go over how we make comments work. And then, Tara, I'm going to dive into how do we do a reply to the comment, because that will show a relational data table and kind of give you a better example of a relation to a relation to a relation. So where do we use the relation right now? Well, if I go to my post.
Are you sharing your screen with us? Or are you just talking to us? Okay.
Only if I have to. Thank you for the reminder. So if I'm in this read to, you can see second post comment and some new comment is here. If we go cheat and look in our database, we also have comments on post ID 1. So if we go back to our homepage and open up the first post, you see the images happen to be the same because we use the same paths in the database, but the comments are actually related to the post that we made them on. So it's not that we're just making a comment and storing it in the database. We are, but we're also storing what comments are related to the post that we have open. The way that we do that, Corwin, you have to npm install buffer on the front end, and then npm install multer goes on the back end. Okay, so on our relation, what we do is we go into our db.js and we say, hey, our post, and it knows all about post because we've got our post model here, has many comments. And the way that the comments are related to the posts is the foreign ID of post ID. What does that mean? What we are telling Sequelize is in our comments table, this foreign IT post ID right here lines up with the ID of the post right here. So when I say post ID 2, that means that this comment is related to this post right here. So what we are able to do is, because we have related those two together, what we are able to do in our server.js is say, hey, when we go get a specific post ID, not only should you go find that specific post that we're looking for, right? That very select star from posts where ID equals whatever number got passed in. We also want to include all of the comments that are associated with that post. Well, how does the database know what comments are related to it? Because we told it posts have many comments, and the way that those two are related is this post ID right here. So what does that look like in practice? Well, if I go to my API directly and I go get my post ID 1, you can see not only is my object here with all of my post data, it also added in this thing called comments. Because we told it it has many comments, it made it in an array, and then it included all of the data from the comments table that are related to the specific post that we requested. Did that help at all? Or were you trying to ask a different question and I just answered a different one?
No, I do remember using that has many.
Yep.
I'm just thinking if there's more. I'll let you know. Thank you.
So we'll do another example with a has many as well, where we say comment replies. We'll say comments has many comment replies, and then be able to pull that information in. Any other questions? Any other brainstorms of things you would like to see? We'll make comment replies work after the break. Did someone have a light bulb moment at some point tonight so far? Good. I know this is overwhelming, but break it down, know that this is all in GitHub, and then think about when you're working on your capstone, instead of going, oh my God, I have no idea how to do this. Think about this as, all right, what did we do in the blog project that is similar to what I'm trying to do right now? May not be identical, but almost everything that is covered in the blog project, you can relate somehow to your capstone. Tomorrow, we will actually re-go over Clerk. We'll use everything that Ryan covered, and we'll add authentication into the blog. We will also set up a users table and go through and see how when a user signs in, it will store the information that the user, basically the author of the post, will store the information of whoever is signed in. We will do that tomorrow. Tonight, we'll see how to do a comment reply, get a little bit more practice doing a model, a relationship, and front-end modifications. Does anyone else have things that they would like to see in their capstone other than comment reply? Or have a question in your capstone itself that you would like to share with the class? Or have something outside of the blog project that you would like to see me do? Okay. If anything pops, oh yeah, go for it.
Just give me 1 second though.
Yep. While Rain is getting stuff together, reminder on Thursday, if you cannot make class on Thursday, please schedule a one-on-one with me. Only needs to be 15 minutes or 12 minutes, I think my calendar says. If you cannot make class on Thursday, or if you are super nervous about presenting your capstone, which I don't encourage you to do, you can schedule with me instead. I encourage you to present in front of the class. Be really good practice for graduation. If you can't make it Thursday, schedule a one-on-one with me. Does not have to be by Thursday, but it should be by early next week. Having a full stack capstone is the one requirement of graduation. The other is your grade has to be above an 80. But your full stack capstone is an absolute must. So Thursday is the moment where we get to see, hey, are you close enough that you can get to that full stack capstone in the next couple weeks? Or are you so far behind that we need to come up with a catch-up plan to get you there? What do you need in your capstone by Thursday? You need a user interaction to trigger something full stack in the database. That could be the ability to type a search query into your front end, hit the search button, have it go get data in the back end, search through that data, and display those results to the user. That's one way of meeting your requirements. It could be a contact form that they fill out. That form saves into the database. Then there's a separate page on your React front end that goes back to the database, gets all of the responses, shows them on the page. It's another way to meet the requirement. You could use a third-party API to go out, get the information, display that information on your page. Ideally, we'd want to see your own database and something kind of full stacky there. But if you are deeply integrating with a third-party API, that will meet all the requirements for your capstone.
Oh my God, thank God.
We basically want to see. We basically want to see a create and a read operation going on. The update and delete are great. If you want to shoot for that, fantastic. If you want to layer in authentication, go for it. I encourage you to. Almost every web application has some form of authentication at this point. But we want to see a create operation and a read operation going on, or a very deep integration with a third-party API. I'm not talking about a little call to go get the weather and show the weather information. That's not going to cut it. But if you are deeply diving into the data, pulling things out, making multiple API calls, making an API call to a third party and storing that information in your database, all of those will meet those requirements. If you don't know if it will meet a requirement or not, shoot me a Slack message with what you're thinking or schedule a one-on-one with you. I can give you a quick green light or red light, or you can wait until Thursday for that.
So I had to go back to the Slack because a lot of people had questions about the API and the database stuff, but I really feel like you just kind of touched on all that tonight. You know what I mean? And I'm happy that you said what you said, because as I told you, I was doing a meal prep capstone. And there are several different APIs that you can use to fetch that information for the recipes. And what I noticed is that once I built everything and then I fetched that, it gave me a lot of stuff to where I'm like, wow, I need more backend. So I think that's a one-on-one.
That's a one-on-one, but think about it, not only kind of see the trees through the forest view, right? Yes, you need a backend, that's the forest, but think about the individual trees as kind of the tables in the database. What do I need to store in that backend? Well, I need to think about, well, maybe if they're going to a meal prep site, they want to be able to create a new meal plan. Well, the meal plan probably has some name on it, right? And then that meal plan is probably going to have some information in it in terms of what the recipes are that I'm storing inside that meal plan. So that's where you want to start thinking about, oh, well, the meal plan itself is one table, that's one tree. And then the recipes inside that meal plan are another tree. And I need some way to make it so that when all of that information shows up on the front end, they can hit the add to meal plan button, and that will save into the database. Now you've used a third-party API to retrieve data, and by making that save button work, you've also built in your own API and saving that information into a database. Now, if you can make it read the data from the database so that you can click a view meal plan button and see everything that you've saved to it, you've got a giant green check mark for all of your requirements and you're good to go.
Okay, just to explain to everyone. So I started off with one capstone that was like, once I broke it down into the steps, I noticed that it's going to take a little longer than this cohort. So I had to do my backup capstone. If anybody's wondering, you know, what's going on with that world, but maybe I can implement that into some type of weather app or something with the geocode, and they can put in an address. Just to explain myself. No one else is doing that, right? Good. All right, great. And Amberlynn, you look great, by the way. You're just so beautiful. All right, bye.
Other questions? Okay, it is break time. Before you go on break or while you're on break, think about other ideas that you want to see, because we got an entire week of content to fill. So think about that. When we come back, we will do replies on comments. Be back at 7:25. So Tara asked a very good question. She said, hey, if I am on a blog post page and I see someone posted here and I want to reply to their post, how would I go about implementing that? This is really good because it's full stack in the database with the new table, and we got to build a UI for it, and we got to do a create operation and a read operation. All really good. So what I like to do is start on the UI, then make the create work, then have that saved in the database, then make the read work, then build the UI for the read. So that's how I think about going through the steps. Now, I will say that professionally, that's not always the case. Sometimes you will be a front-end developer and they won't even give you the back-end code. They'll say, here's how you make your API call. Here's the data that you expect to get back. Here's it working in Postman. Now you go do that. You could also be on the back end and be building out all those APIs, but then need to go to the database administrator to actually go create the table for you. And they'll look at your database table design and go, my God, this is terrible. No, this is how you should store the information instead. So as a full stack developer, we get to see all three of those sides, but it really does depend on what kind of company you're working in, what your job role is, if you're working with clients directly, that kind of stuff. Corwin, you had a question.
Yeah, my bad. So I was like just trying to catch up on the code, and I'm gonna share my screen.
Yep. You don't have to get everything working tonight. This is more of a just to show you how it could be done kind of thing. But if you think you are mostly caught up and you're stuck on one little thing, I can help you debug it.
Yeah, it's the API URL.
Okay, all you need for that is an import.
Oh, okay.
That should fix that. And then, yep, that's right. So you should be good to go now.
All right, thank you.
No problem. Anyone else need help or have a question before we get our reply comment feature working? Okay. That's a really good question, Shay. Shay said, as a full stack dev, do you find yourself working on more back end or front end code? I ask that question of everyone I hire, because if I'm hiring a full stack dev, I often ask, well, do you enjoy doing front end or back end code more? Or if you could, set your own ratio, what would you like to do? And I've had a lot of applicants be like, oh, I'm very good at both of them. Lies. They're all lies. No one is as equally good in the front end as they are in the back end. I certainly am much better in the back end. I am not necessarily the most visual person. I like logic. I like debugging. I like getting right down to it. And when I write back end code, I know it's going to work. And I know that if it breaks, it's going to be really easy for me to fix it because it's going to break at one specific spot. I could build an entire front end that's completely functional, hand it over to a client, and then go, this is really ugly. And I could be like, but it's, look at all the thousands of lines of code that it's doing in the back end and all the database and all of the magic. And they're like, we don't care, it's ugly. So I definitely prefer the back end. However, working in a small team, there are certainly times where my front end developer is just swamped and they can't do a design. They are working on a bunch of different things. And all of my other developers are more back-end leaning, and we need this feature created. So I obviously can build a user interface, and as I'm about to exemplify in the replying to a comment, it's not going to be the prettiest thing. It's going to work, but I'm definitely not a designer. I definitely don't start out in Sketch and Figma and make it look pretty and then build it. I just build things and then let people clean up after me. But it does depend. And I would say a lot of the industry will look down on front end developers and go, oh, well, you're not smart enough to be a full stack developer. We can't trust you in the back end. I'm better as a back end developer. I think that's horseshit. You can easily make 6 figures as a front end web designer and be the most important person at the company. So follow wherever your passions are, because there are plenty of jobs available in any of those sectors. Full stack is certainly in more demand because it's so hard to be a full stack developer. But when you wear multiple hats, when you are really good at the database and the back end and the front end, you aren't an expert in any one of them. And I try to tell students that, and people I mentor, I don't claim to be an expert. I'm pretty good at teaching these concepts because I've been teaching them for 4 years now, but and I feel qualified to teach it because I use them every day at work, but I am certainly not a JavaScript expert, right? When Ryan comes in and talks about JavaScript and how JWTs work under the hood and how Express is making the middlewares work and all of that stuff, that is a whole level of expertness that I am not on. So yes, I'm approaching expert level for debugging junior level software developer code, but short of, other than developing or other than debugging, I certainly don't claim to be an expert in any of this stuff. But if you narrow in on one of them, it does become easier to become an expert on that.
Yeah, because I was curious because when you say full stack dev, I was always wondering like how much would you have to know on both ends to consider yourself a full stack dev? Like, would you have to know like equally, or does it matter if you know or if you lean into more than the other? So it was always just I was always just curious about that.
Yeah, it's a really good question. I consider a full stack dev, a senior level full stack dev is someone who's going to be able to create a project from scratch, who's going to be making database decisions, is going to be planning out the project before they start coding it, is able to help junior developers when they get stuck and give them guidance. It's being able to juggle project management a little bit better. That's all what I consider senior level. What I consider junior level is, can you implement a feature? If I tell you, hey, I want to be able to reply to a comment, can you go out and build that? And when you get stuck, can you either A, get yourself unstuck by using Google and Stack Overflow and documentation and all of that, or can you figure out when you're so stuck that you need to ask for help? Those are the two things that I look for in a junior level developer. And then more entry level developer, more intern level, more zero career experience. It's more about getting those skills to identify when to ask for help and making sure that when you are in a one-on-one session that you get all of your questions answered, so that over the next week or whenever your next one-on-one is, that you don't feel stuck, again. So that's kind of my personal breakdown of junior, of entry level, junior, and senior level. Doug, could you head to my blog and see if you can grab a blog post on entry level versus junior level versus senior level? That will touch a little bit on all of that. So, Palash, it's a good question. You are all, so the industry likes to group everyone into junior level and senior level. If you're at a much bigger company, they will break that down into like between 7 and 10 levels. And so every like 9 months or 2 years, you can kind of level up and climb the pay scale while still being considered junior level. You can go from junior level to senior level if you're really applying yourself in a 3 to 5 year period. And then salary wise, you're looking at a difference between I would say $60,000 to $75,000 annually as a junior level developer, up to about $100,000 to $150,000 as a senior level developer annually. Obviously, a lot of that changes based off of what area you're applying, and then the whole factor of remote work has blown up the world of salaries and negotiations and stuff like that. But one thing that I touched in that blog post is that the problem is the industry doesn't really have a notion of entry level. So they're hiring junior level developers with 3 to 4 years of experience. And it's like, well, where do I start with 0 to 1 years of experience, right? Like, where are those job opportunities? And some companies will call them internships. Some companies will call those apprenticeships. Some of those internships, if you becoming an intern at Google is one of the hardest things to do. They have an acceptance rate that is much lower than Harvard or any of the other Ivies, but they pay their interns something like $95,000 a year. And at that point, you're like, well, shit, I'll do that, like, so every company calls it something a little different. Some companies won't have an entry level and they consider junior 3 years, and you just can't start at a company like that. But I do think that is a real issue in the industry of if you're saying junior level, you need to differentiate between higher level junior or lower level junior, right? Because you got to give someone a start everywhere. The other thing I will say is that it is very hard to become a senior developer without a senior developer mentoring you. There's only so much that you can learn on your own. And at some companies, it will be tough to find a good senior developer to mentor you. It might just be that the senior developer is swamped. It may be that they aren't used to mentoring. They could be the best engineer in the world. But if they aren't good about breaking down concepts or remembering what it was like when they were learning that concept, they may be a terrible mentor, right? They may be a great mentor, but so swamped in all the tasks that they have to get done that they don't have the time to slow down and kind of guide you through that. And so if you're in a job interview, especially with a full-time 40 an hour a week position, it is very important to ask, hey, what does mentorship look like? Both technically in terms of if I get stuck on something or I need help planning something out or getting infrastructure set up, who do I go to? How does that work? But then also in terms of, hey, there's a lot more to entering the workforce and being a developer other than just code, right? So having someone to mentor you through that side of things is also very important. Unfortunately, that's a very easy question to ask and a very hard question to answer. So it's always worth asking that in a job interview of, well, if I get this position, what does a 9 to 5 look like? And then also, what does your mentorship program look like? How do I make sure that I'm growing and climbing the career ladder? Very good question to ask. I've hired 2 teams of 4 engineers each over the past couple years, and the main thing that I say is, even though we're a startup, even though we don't have access to LinkedIn Learning or Udemy or anything like that, I do weekly one-on-ones with all of my employees. And we have that in the calendar, and oftentimes you'll shoot me a Slack message and say, hey, I don't really have anything for the one-on-one today. Do you have anything? No, we cancel it. But it is important to have that as a, hey, I'm really struggling on this, or I'm having this problem with a team member and it just never felt appropriate to bring it up. But because we've got this standing one-on-one in the books, and then we do like a 3-month plan of, hey, what's something that you would like to learn or push yourself on or get a little bit more practice on? We can't always give you those resources, but when we are assigning tasks and figuring out what features are coming next, it's certainly something that we can factor into those decisions. So I take a very individualized approach. I hope most of you know that from one-on-ones and working through problems and that kind of stuff. But that is very important to ask at a company level that you're going into. Any other random questions before we implement this feature? Corin.
So thought I had it, but once I went to I was able to choose the file and get a picture, but when I hit create a post, it did a fail to fetch.
Share screen.
Okay.
So
So I didn't. Oh wait, hold on, my bad. Can you? I don't think you
you
can
want
see
to
my
be,
screen.
hold on. I can just take over right from the code.
All right.
New post. Form data, new post. Okay, everything's right here. So can I see your backend code?
Okay. Oh no, that's not gonna. Does that work?
Nope.
No. Okay.
Okay. I can still control server.js. So you are missing all of the stuff with Molter, which is what is loading up the new post here. And then we change this rec.body as well to use the file information instead. So you need both Molter and the changes to the server.post new post in order to get that to work.
All right. Thank you.
Yep. Okay. So any other questions? Okay. So we're going to get this comment feature working. I am going to go a little fast, just like I did on the file upload stuff. You do not have to follow along. This is more so you have an example. What I would recommend you do is write down the steps as you understand them, because this is going to go through all the capstone requirements that you need for Thursday. So grab a notebook, open up the Notes app, whatever you do to take notes. I would recommend just writing down the steps, not necessarily focusing on the code. Or you could also write down where the code is, if that is something that you can kind of trace through a little bit easier. Okay, first things first, I need to be able to post a new comment. So what I'm going to do is head to my front end. In my read page, I've got each individual comment showing up here. I'm going to throw in another HR to make a header row show up in between it. Then I'm going to do a text area. Now let's do an input text, make it a little bit smaller. That's going to go in a form. We're going to close out here. And then we are going to say button, class name, BTN primary, reply. And that is going to show up. Kind of okay with that for now. Could always change the UI, put the button down on the next line, whatever. But I think that this is pretty clear. If I type in here and hit the reply button, it's going to reply to the post up here, which is what we want. So now I'm going to throw a type of submit on my reply. I'm going to put a on submit. And this is kind of interesting because we need to know what comment are we replying to. So what we're going to do is get the event and we are going to say, hey, we are going to async. Our response is going to come from an await to our fetch to our API URL to comment reply. And we are going to include in that URL the comment ID that we are replying to. So I say comment ID here. And I need to include a couple pieces of information. I need to include my headers, which is going to be my content type of application JSON. I have no idea where that div came from. Okay, how did I make you so mad? Am I missing a curly? What in... I have really angered it. Closing curly, closing curly, closing form. Jeez, if I take this out, will you go back to normal? What did I do to deserve this? Return the div. Okay, let's try that again. On submit. Close out that curly, close out that curly, save. You know what? Pissed you off? Let me just try it again. On submit, it's getting an event. The event is const responsing and await, which means I need my async, which is going to fetch to my API URL. It is going to comment reply, and we're using the comment.id. You're also going to pass in, oh, you know what? I think I forgot the curlies here. The headers. Now we're on the right track. Content type, application JSON, and the body, which is going to be a stringification of my text, which is going to come from my event target. What is it? Elements. And then we put a name or an ID on this, ID of reply text. And this is going to be my reply text value. Okay, that looks right. We need to throw our event prevent default on it. And then we're going to see if this is working. So I come back over to, oh, you know what? I need my method post. And now we just see if this section of it alone is working. So I come back over here to my server. I do my server.post. I'm going to send it to my comment reply. / and then the comment ID that I'm replying to. Going to be an async rec res. I throw in a res.send because I need to keep track of, I always need to send something back to a request. And then I'm just going to console log my rec.params.comment ID and my rec.body.text to make sure that's showing up in the backend. So I save that, go back over here. I type in ABC, I hit reply, and it refreshed the page on me because I didn't spell on submit right. Try that again. ABC, I hit reply, cannot read reply text because I can't spell elements right. Like that on another line, but I guess I'm really that far over. Okay. I hit reply, nothing happens. But if I go to my back end, I see not only my ABC, but what comment I'm replying to, number 3. So keep in mind in Beekeeper that the second post comment is this one right here. So when I'm hitting the reply button, it's properly pulling in the ID of the comment that I'm responding to. Any questions on that so far? Okay, now I need to make a place for that comment to be saved in my database. So I say comment reply.js. I'm going to go steal my entire comment, put it in here, and update it to say comment reply, comment reply, comment reply. And on this one, we're only going to keep track of two things. One, the content, and two, the comment ID that it is stored on. So whenever we use associations, we almost always use the ID. The ID is always an integer. Now, in order, Plush.
I have a question on 2 steps back. Like which table do we apply dot has many to link it?
We're going to do that step right now.
Okay.
So
Gotcha.
in the DB, we have to first connect it to the model. So we say import the model. From comment reply. I don't know why I type post model. Comment reply model. Then we give the comment reply connection to the comment reply model DB. And now this is where we do the association. So we say the comment has many comment reply, and the foreign key that connects them together is the comment ID right here. So we go back, we throw that in there, we save. It is mad in my DB that it cannot find the comment reply because I forgot the .js file extension. Now, not only is it connected, but if everything is working right, when I go to Beekeeper, I can refresh my tables, see my comment reply, and also see my comment ID here has that little key. That gold key is showing you that it is associated to the comments ID. And that is terrible text to see that. But if you squint, you can actually see the comment ID is pointing to the comments table, the ID on that column. So let's see that in practice. Now, in my comment, in my server, when I post a comment, what I want to do is go to my comment await, my comment reply. I don't have access to that because not only do I need it here and set up the association, I also need to add it in my export so I can import it on my other files. So I import my comment reply. In my server.js, I go up to my other models and I add in my comment reply. Now I come down to my post and I say comment reply create, and create it with the content of my rec.body.text and the comment ID coming from the rec.params.comment ID. Why is it params? Because I have it in the URL up here. So if it's the URL, it's params. If it's in the body, it's rec.body. Now I could put the comment ID in the param or in the body, and that would also work as well. So it's just personal preference. Whenever you're doing something related to IDs, it's more typical to see it in the URL, but that's not a hard and fast rule.
Max, line 63 has comment instead of comment ID.
Thank you. Important to note that whatever you have on the left side of your creation lines up with whatever the fields are inside of your model. If you ever notice that there's a mistake with your model, you do have to drop the table or alter the table manually in Beekeeper. The only time that the model will sync over with your updated form fields is the first time that table is created, if the table does not exist. Okay, so I am going to test all of this. I'm going to type in ABC. I'm going to hit my reply button. It appears nothing has happened. But if I go to my Beekeeper Studio and refresh my table, I see my ABC and my comment ID number 3. And what's kind of cool is because Beekeeper knows about the association, if I click on this little out button, you'll see it takes me right to the comment in the comments table that is linked to that association. So now what I can do is I can say, hey, when we fetch all of the posts, don't only include the comment, I also want you to, on the comment, include the comment reply. Now, when we go get our 3011 post number, we're on post number 2. Not only do I get my second post, not only do I get the comments on that post, but I also get the reply to the comment on the post itself. Pausing there. Does anyone have questions on that? Okay. Now we bring it home. We need to tell our front end, hey, whenever there is a new post, go reload the post, go get the new comments that are associated with it. So I'm going to go up to our make API call all the way up here, and I'm going to move this outside of my use effect. What that will allow me to do is to reuse this make API call. So I'm going to go back down to where I post my comments, and I'm going to say, hey, after you send in that data, I want you to make the API call that we did when the page first loaded to get all of the comments in. Then I want to say, hey, up here, if there are, let's create a new div. And in this div, I am going to go to my comment, and I'm going to loop over all of the comment replies. And that is going to give me access to each reply. And then each one of those replies, actually, let's make this an unordered list, so it's just bullet points. And this is going to be a list item that has a key of the reply.id. And it's going to make the reply content show up. Now we go back to the browser. We take a look in our app. I'm going to post a comment reply. I hit reply button. Nothing happens and the world hates me. Backend did not crash. In the front end, oh, that's an old error. What did I do? Comment replies. Make API call after we submit the form. It should be post comments Oh, I did a separate. No. Make API call to the post with the ID. Set the data.post. Why is that not showing up? When I make the API call, show the response. The comment replies are in the comment. So let's debug that. Let me go. Post.comments, give me each comment. When we're going over the comment, give me the comment replies. So let's console log the comment and see what data is in there. So I refresh. I have I console logged that on 95, so I want to look at 95. Comment replies are there. Little stump there. Div the UL, but the UL is empty. Oh, fuck me. And there are our comments. See, you guys aren't the only one who makes stupid mistakes. What I had forgotten was I did all of the work to generate the LI, but I hadn't returned it. So it was making the LI, but it wasn't making it show up anywhere. So as soon as I added that in, it shows up here. And then in here, I can say, replying to some genius, hit the reply button and have that reply show up there. Tara, was that along the lines of what you were hoping for?
Yes. And then if we wanted to like the comment, we could do it the same way that we sort of add in we added in like the delete button and then just kind of style it.
Yep. You
Okay.
could do the simple way of doing likes is basically adding a column in the comment table, assuming that you're liking the comment and not the comment reply. And then just keep track of like how many likes, how many people have hit the like button. The more complicated way of doing it is making another table for comment likes and keeping track of which users hit the like button. So two different ways of thinking about that. The latter requires some integration into Clerk, right? Because if you're trying to keep track of who hit the like button, you need to know who is hitting the button. So that you would have to use Clerk for. We could actually probably do that example a little bit later in class, because tomorrow we're going to take everything that Ryan taught and build it into the blog project. And then we could actually implement that of keeping track of who hit the like button. But that would be another thing we can do. Shay asks, can we show how we would delete a comment? Yeah, I will do that. I'll just do that on the comment reply, but it would be pretty much the exact same way. We go to our comment reply and we'll add in a span that's a delete button. We'll say on click actually we don't even need, we can just async it. We are going to await our fetch to our API URL. That is going to go to comment reply. It's going to include the reply.id. So it knows which one to delete. And we're just going to set a method on that of delete. From there, we go back to our backend into our server.js. We say server.delete our comment reply. And get the ID. We are still going to async rec res it. We're just going to res.send something empty back so we don't forget it. Then we are going to say await the comment reply.destroy, where the ID of the comment in the database lines up with our rec.params.id that we passed right here. Then on the front end, after the delete is done, go make the API call that loads in all the data again, so that the data on the front end doesn't show the deleted comment. So I come over here. I really don't like that styling of the button. So on that span, I'm going to add style of color red, text decoration of underline, and a cursor of pointer. So now it actually looks like a button I can hit. I hit ABC and it deletes. Helpful?
Very.
Hopefully that breaks it down, because there are a lot of steps to get the model set up and do the relationships and all of that stuff. But once you get that done, what was this? This was a couple lines of code here, a couple lines of code here. And as long as you're getting the right ID and sending it in, you do want to be careful, because the reply ID is different than the comment.id up here. So when you get into that relational data, you get IDs on IDs on IDs. So you want to be careful you're using the right one. But that's a pretty easy way of doing it. Yes, Corwin, in this situation, anyone would be able to delete. I can, if you remember, either to end of class tomorrow or class on Wednesday, once we get user authentication integrated into this, I can make it so that only people signed in would be able to delete.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question too, would be able to have people with authorization, like if they signed in a profile, to delete posts or comments under their posts. That was literally my.
Yep, we have to get clerk set up and go through all of the steps that Ryan went over on Wednesday and Thursday. Once we get those integrated, we can come back to questions over user specificness. We could even get it set up to say there are two user types. There are not signed in at all, at which point you can read comments, but you can't make any comments. We could make a regular user that's saying you're allowed to comment, but you're not allowed to delete. And then we could make an admin user that says you're only allowed to delete. So those are all things that we can add further on in the week once we get clerk set up. That just feels like a bad idea to dive in right now of like, let's remember everything from last week and get it set up. But that's where we'll start class tomorrow. Other questions? Hopefully tonight was helpful. May have been a little boring just watching. It is a good reminder that you can learn as much from watching and listening as you can from doing. I will also upload all of this in GitHub right now so that you are able to reference any of this code without having to go through the entire video. That is up on GitHub. Corwin, what's up?
Um, it says that it can't read properties of null reading slice.
Oh, I had that error in class. What did I do to fix it? Oh, you have to, in your front end, change the ID equals and then
Hmm.
whatever to name equals and then whatever.
I
Because we're
do.
using form data uses name, but when we use event.target, it uses ID. So we just switch those over.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Other questions for this evening? If you have any ideas that pop in your head of, oh, I'd love to see this, feel free to Slack me and I can prep tomorrow to have that a little bit more put together. But all the ideas that you threw out tonight, really good suggestions. Allie, what did you mean by art?
I did not mean to type that. Like I was typing something and it transferred over.
I forget who I was doing a one-on-one with. It was I think today or yesterday, and the cursor just jumped to the back end. I'm like, excuse me, over in the front end. I'm typing here.
Max.
Yes.
So just a couple of questions. So, I mean, if we're going to graduate, I'm pretty sure we'll know before that time come, but you guys will send us like a message like, hey, guess what? You're graduating, right?
Thursday will be that determination where we will either say, hey, you've met all the requirements because you've done a create and a read operation from the database. Have fun deploying with Nathan. Stick around for Laura's career week, but you are all on track to graduate. That's scenario A. Scenario B is, hey, you're not quite meeting everything
Right,
by Thursday. So we need to figure out where are you behind? What kind of one-on-ones can we get you on? Can we set you up with a TA? I will probably be a little heavy-handed on that and say, hey, you should probably be meeting with me, and let's determine how we can catch you up and make sure that you're there within the next week or so after the check-in. That's scenario 2. Scenario 3 is you share your screen and you've got no backend set up, you've got no database set up, you've got a little vanilla JavaScript going on, and I go, the fuck, man, where's all your code? That's the worst case scenario that we really want to avoid. Aiming to have something set up in your backend, something set up in your front end, some kind of attempt to send data from the front end to the back end to the database. That's what worst case scenario we want to be at on Thursday. Best case scenario is you've crossed that threshold. You've got one feature fully functional with a create and a read, and you're all set for graduation. And I will send you a message after Thursday's class and say, you're either scenario 1, 2, or 3, and let you know of that.
Well, that's great to know that, you have some type of action plan for everyone to try to push everyone to graduation,
Yes. And I will say there are some students who have done one-on-ones with me and have already crossed that threshold of meeting the requirements in their project to graduate. So it is not an unobtainable thing. There are students who are already there.
My biggest thing is, and this is just a moment of honesty, I just have like a couple of like stuffs in Canvas, like homework that I know I need to submit. I comprehend to the levels where I can complete it, and I just need to get it into you. So that's just a moment of honesty. So after Thursday, I will be able, hopefully before Thursday is all turned in, but I'll be able to complete that, right?
Yep. And the threshold in Canvas is just an 80%. We definitely weigh more on the capstone, even though the requirements are much smaller in terms of what you have to get done. In order to do all of those steps, it's a massive undertaking, right? I mean, look at the blog project. We've worked on this for 4 or 5 days, and it's still nowhere close to what we would think of a blog if we like went up and signed up for Blogger or WordPress or anything like that. So Rome is not built in a day. It is a lot of steps to very easy to say we need a front end call and a create call and a read call. Very hard to actually make all of that work. But the good news is you have a lot of flexibility in that to determine what's the most important feature in my capstone that I want to show off the database nature of things. And then the only other threshold is that 80% on your grade. And just 2 or 3 assignments can really skyrocket that up. Especially if it's one like the midterm assignment that will really boost your grade up.
Pertaining to the capstone,
Mhm.
when I present something, I do like to do kind of like a layout of how I'm going to present it. When we present our capstone, do you want us to show the finished product, or do you want us literally to go into the code and show people line by line how we're making it happen?
Great question. There is a document for all of that I will struggle to find right now, but I will definitely share it within the next week or so. Oh, it is killing me that I can't find it. Anyway, I will post that. Basically, I believe everyone gets, it's either 5 or 6 minutes to present. We recommend people split that in half and do the first 3 minutes about talking about your journey. Keep in mind that all of your fellow students will be presenting. I will do the hard part of going before all of you and sharing with your friends and family a couple vocabulary terms and a brief diagram of how it all works. So you are not at your presentation, you do not have to explain what full stack is. You don't have to explain what JavaScript is. You don't have to explain what HTML is. What we want to hear from you is what happened over the past 6 months and what did you learn? What were your highlights? What were your lowlights? What were your light bulb moments? What made you excited for your career? What made you nervous for your career? What do you want to focus on after graduation? All of that kind of stuff. That's in the first 3 minutes. The second half of those 3 minutes, we recommend that you have your capstone open in another tab, already signed in, because while everyone is really proud that you got your login screen working, it is probably the least exciting part of your app, right? So have a tab open exactly to the page that you want to show off. You can have multiple tabs open if you want to jump and show off a couple different things. You can talk about the database and the calls that are happening and how it's a really big deal, but you don't need to go into the specific of look at this code, because for most of the people in the audience, you could put up C# code up there and Python code right underneath it, and 95% of the audience, other than your fellow students, are going to just have their eyes glaze over and not be able to read the code at all. So a major win for you to be able to read the code and write the code and be excited about the code. Everyone else in the audience is going to be less excited about the code, more excited about the thing that you built with that code. So
The user
user journey. Yes, exactly. So first 3-ish minutes are kind of your standard presentation about thinking about your journey, everything that you've learned in the class, and sharing that. The last 3 minutes are more of your demo, less code oriented, more showing off what you accomplished with your code. We do have an example slide deck and like end of the capstone rundown document of how you should start prepping. I will share that with you guys as soon as I find it.
So you know how we, oh, sorry.
I was just going to answer Palash's question is who's in the audience other than Careers and Code? It is open to the public. You are welcome to bring your friends and family. We will have a meetup link in the next week or two with all of the details that people can RSVP on. We'll have light refreshments and cake there and typical graduation ceremony stuff. It is the last Thursday in the schedule at 6 p.m. We encourage students to get there at 5:30. It is very similar to kickoff. It will be in the same spot. We'll have an event photographer there. We will have graduation certificates for you guys. We don't do the whole cap and gown thing, but it is presenting for anyone is stressful. Do not need to stress about this. Just friends and family that are going to be there. Just a way to celebrate the past, at that point, 6 months that you've been in the program and everything that you've learned.
And there's probably a photo op, of course.
There will be, we'll take a group photo at the end for sure.
So you know how you're working out and they're like 6 minutes, but that's like 6 minutes of hell. That's kind of what I'm thinking of right now. So
we
Go
do
ahead.
have a big timer at the back of the room. We will hold up a sign that says 3 minutes remaining, so you know to switch to your demo. If you go 30 seconds over and then switch to your demo, that's fine. You just have 2.5 minutes to demo instead. So it's not an exact science. And don't quote me on the time. It might be 5 minutes. I have to figure that out. But we have a timer so you can know where you're at. That is how all the TED Talks are done. You never see that, but there's always a timer either counting up or counting down. And so professional presenters actually time themselves and they know how long they're supposed to be spending on things. And then if they're getting behind, they know what to kind of cut out on the fly. But we do have a big timer. We do have signs that we hold up to say, 3 minutes remaining, switch to your demo. And then some poor sucker is in charge of the slow clap. So if you are going way over on your demo, we will slow clap you right off the stage. It is very embarrassing. It is painful for everyone in the room, but we are not messing around. We've got a lot of people to walk across that stage. We really want to get you going on all of that. So it will be intros. Jesse will talk about the program. I'll come up on stage, talk about what full stack is, what languages you learned. You guys will do everyone will get 5 or 6 minutes, half of which is slide deck. Other half is demo. Make sure you've got your demo queued up. We'll practice that the final week of class. No new content, all about getting your capstones over the finish line, practicing presentations, and then presentations are on Thursday, and then we eat cake.
So you have a Dave Chappelle wrap it up box. Gotcha. If you know what I'm talking about. So I'm definitely got the schedule one-on-one, and I guess you probably recommend this for everybody. So we're not talking about how our head fell off and it's a therapy session, you know what I mean? But I'll do one-on-one just to kind of, do like a mock graduation thing with you.
Sure.
Cool.
And the whole final week of class is all the TAs come in, and we just like triage on last minute capstone, getting this feature working on your code, practicing your presentation. That we do have Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday all booked out for that. Obviously you want to get a head start on that, but it isn't super early to start thinking about that, but you also probably have another week or two before you need to start panicking and thinking about graduation. And it is killing me that I can't find those links. Ha! Found it.
Oh, I just have a question.
Shoot, Allie. Sorry.
No, you're fine. I don't know what's wrong with my code right now. It's just, it won't fetch. I just don't know.
Share screen. So do you have your backend running in a terminal?
I I think I had one and I might have closed it out.
Yep. So both of those are your front end. So npm start and then refresh your front end. Okay, backend crashed. So if you're interested in sticking around and seeing this debugging session, you're welcome to. Otherwise, you can GTFO, and I will see you guys tomorrow for another practice round of Clerk and integrating that into our blog, and then layering that into our API calls and stuff like that. Okay. Import db.js does not provide an export name comment reply. So db is really tricky because we do it here. And then we also do it here. And we also do it down here. And then finally, what we also set up was in here, we said comment has many comment replies. And it is linked through a foreign key of comment ID. Okay, no crash on the back end, which is good. We refresh here, and now you're back in business.
Yay, okay.
Someone else had their hand raised. Week 20 of 24, Corwin. We are rounding out. And this is, other than the last week of the program, this is your last full week with me. You get 3 more days with me the day after Labor Day, and then you get Nathan for a week and a half and Laura for a week for the career module.
Okay, wait. So I have another quick question. It failed to fetch again. Is that because it's just like
So check your back end. Your back end probably crashed with an error message.
yeah, it definitely did. I wonder why though.
You want to share your screen and we can look at it?
Yes, says my node mon crashed. Let me see.
Let me request. It is mad because cannot read properties of undefined reading size. That is because in our server JS, no. Did you hit the create post button or did you just?
Yeah, I just typed in like a new post 3 and then I added some text and then I did another one and then I did create posted, but it wouldn't pop up.
Did you pick an image?
No.
That's why. So you would have to do something like if there is a rec.file and the file size. So now you can create post without image and create posts. Boo. Once it crashes, we always have to restart it.
Yeah.
Okay. Now we create posts. Still boo.
Got to handle there not being an image in the else.
Because
you've got if there's an image and it's too big, and then you have else.
yeah, I'm gonna cheat on that one. Did that actually work? Post without image. Okay, so let's try that. Okay, so no error here. Your post after it, oh, not post, your new post. No, it's got the navigate to in here. If there's a data error, alert it. Otherwise, navigate it to, use navigate. Why isn't that working? And expected, oh, it's probably because I need to send back something in here. That will probably fix it. Aha.
Yes. Ooh. Thank you.
To be fair, half of those things were broken in my own code. I just haven't like done the error handling to say, well, if you create a post without an image, how is that supposed to go in the database and that kind of stuff. It's kind of similar to when I did the, if there is an image, then make the image tag show up, kind of along those same lines, right? Of like, hey, make sure you're handling that and allowing or not allowing that to happen. So form validation. Thank you, Doug, on that quick assist. Have an awesome night, everyone. See you guys tomorrow.
Good night.